Every few years, a new regulatory or compliance requirement does come along that crystallizes internal audit's focus. Last time we saw this was Sarbanes-Oxley 10 years ago. I think the implementation of the new COSO framework is on that order because companies will really need to be compliant with the new framework by December of 2014, because in COSO's view, the old framework will have been superseded by that date. So anyone who doesn't think that this is a looming requirement needs to really look hard at what does the COSO framework entail and what are the expectations in terms of when it needs to be implemented. So if I'm a chief audit executive out there today, I'm going to recognize that that deadline is looming, and I'm going to make sure my team is trained, they're brought up to speed on it so that we can assist management in making sure that it's designed and implemented within our company.
Organizations will want to turn to internal audit to look for help in implementing the new framework and implementing the conversion or change from the 92 to the 2013 framework. And that's great, and that's something that you want to look for, but it is an organizational initiative. And so we need to be sure that the organization is not looking solely to internal audit to implement the changes. It's an organizational initiative that will require awareness of audit committees, executive leadership, management, operating management, and internal audit in partnership to making sure that the conversion is successfully achieved.
The COSO update, I think, is critical for companies, particularly those who are in publicly traded companies in the United States. With the adoption of Sarbanes-Oxley in 2002 and the subsequent rules for Sarbanes-Oxley implementation, the SEC has recognized that the COSO internal control framework is an acceptable framework by which internal controls can be designed and assessed. So there's no publicly traded company in the United States that shouldn't be looking at this new framework and asking themselves, how does our system of internal controls align with the expectations that would be encompassed in this new framework?
Well, interestingly, we already know that there are initiatives in the public sector to apply the framework and recognize the fact that the framework is being updated. So, for example, in the federal government, they have what's called the Green Book, and there's a project now to update their Green Book, and in the update, the GAO is very aware that COSO has updated our framework and wants to consider the updated framework in the update of their own specific guidance, which is applied in a governmental setting.
Well, naturally, the design and complexity of an internal control, a system of internal controls, and a framework that a company uses is dependent on the design and the size and complexity of the company itself. So yes, I absolutely would expect to see different systems of internal controls and the complexity of internal controls for small companies than I would for large companies, and certainly different from those that I would expect to see in multinational or global companies.
I do not think fundamentally there is a difference in the application. The framework is broadly written, and the fundamental concepts, the components, for example, of control environment, risk assessment, control activities, information and communication and monitoring, are components that are equally applicable to larger organizations and smaller organizations.
There are 5 steps that I think immediately come to mind for me in terms of implementation. First and foremost, read and understand the framework. It is not complex. It is not very difficult from making the leap from the 92 framework to the 2013 framework, but you need to understand the framework and understand what's changed. Secondly, educate the audit committee, executive management, financial management, and importantly, the entire suite of governance, risk, and compliance functions across the organization so everybody is understanding what the framework is all about. Third, start planning as soon as possible. Fourth, decide if the 92 or the 2013 framework will be used for SOX 404 assessments and attestations, because that decision will need to be made in 2013. And lastly, establish a process for identifying controls, assessing controls, and, where necessary, implementing new controls.
I believe that the framework represents the best thinking there is on internal control that's available today. And furthermore, that it's stood the test of time, being originally issued in 1992 with the fundamental aspects of that framework remaining in place, and has been well accepted in the marketplace. For those reasons, I think that those that need to consider internal control and apply it, whether it's applied narrowly to external financial reporting or more broadly to the other operational and compliance objectives as well, would be well served to use the COSO framework as a basis for the evaluations.